Cannabis, they've got everything that you need. Seeds, nutrients, they even have a free grower's guide that you can download. Right now you can get the OG mix pack of seeds, which is going to have the OG Kush feminized, the Fire OG feminized, and the Skywalker OG feminized seeds. You're going to get 5 of each for $129. So click on the link in the show notes to get you over to I Love Growing Marijuana and pick up some seeds. And I want you to remember that Delta Leaf Labs has that plant DNA sex testing kit that you're going to need to find out what you're working with. They make it really easy to take a sample from your plant. Doesn't matter how old or young she is. You're going to send that sample back to the lab, and a few days later you're going to know exactly what you've got, whether a male or a female plant. So go over to deltaleaflabs.com, order your testing kits today, and at checkout use promo code IMGS10 to get 10% off of your order. Alright, now let's get started. Well everyone, this is the In My Grow Show, and as always, I'm your host Alex. And I want to thank you for showing up again to listen to me talk about cannabis. Now I'm going to start a new series called The Predator of the Week, and today I'm going to talk about the lovely ladybug. Later on I'm also going to play a conversation that I had with my buddy Rodney Medina. He was cool enough to take some time to talk to me about cannabis. But before that, let's get started with the strain of the week. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Shiva skunk. And she is a cross between the skunk number 1 and the Northern Lights number 5. That has a very nice, earthy, dirty kind of cannabis smell that the skunk usually has. Not so much burnt rubber like an actual skunk does, but to me it is a little kind of earthy. Now the internet says that she is a lazy high. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a lazy high. It was definitely mellow, and it did zap my motivation, but definitely something I would use when my day's over, because once again, that's what indicas do to me. They make me real sleepy, they slow me down. So when you're ready to relax, see if you can find some Shiva skunk. Now, as I'm reading my notes, my thoughts may get a little scattered. That's because I just finished smoking a bowl of that, the lemon skunk that I still have. Man, that stuff is good. So yeah, I may kind of drift along today. So moving on to my social media, I want to stay on the topic of hoop houses and the fact that some farmers in the North County of Santa Barbara are still fighting certain county officials so they can keep using hoop houses to cultivate. If you're not familiar with what a hoop house is, they're kind of, just imagine a temporary greenhouse. Kind of a floating structure, not really permanent. And the growers and the cultivators need our help in that fight to keep those hoop houses. So if you're on Instagram, you can go to @petition805. From there, you'll be able to link to a petition that you can sign to show support for these growers to use hoop houses. And that website's going to do a lot better job at explaining what they're all about than I just did. Because man, it feels like it took me a while to get through that. Like I said, I'm really high. Also, Cop Sun is having their Leaf Learning meeting, which is held at the Carpinteria Women's Club Wednesday, February 27th from 5 to 6 p.m. And it will be a panel discussion with Dr. Margaret Peterson, Dr. Connie, Liz Rogan, and Autumn Shelton. If you want to find out more details, you can go to their Instagram profile, which is @CopSun, that is KOPSUN, and you can also get ticket information there. And that's all the social media that I have to talk about. Next, let's move on to the report from the Cannabis Front line. So, North Dakota House of Representatives defeated a decriminalization bill on the House floor by a narrow margin of 43 to 47 votes. On that same day, Legalize ND announced that they will try again with a 2020 legalization ballot initiative. Good on you guys, Legalize ND, for not giving up. For, saying, okay, you beat us one time, but we're going to take it to the next step. Let me know how I can help. Regulators in Iowa added 2 new medical cannabis qualifying conditions to the current list: ulcerative colitis and severe pediatric autism with self-injury or aggressive behavior. Keeping on the subject of autism, I found something written up at the normal website. The article is called "Children with Autism Possess Decreased Endocannabinoid Levels." And this is coming out of Jerusalem, Israel. And it says, Israeli researchers compared endocannabinoid serum levels in 93 patients with autism spectrum disorder versus a control group. They reported substantially lower serum levels of the primary endocannabinoid anandamide, as well as its related compounds in children with ASD. In recent months, several clinical trials have demonstrated that the supplemental administration of plant-derived CBD-dominant cannabis extract is associated with symptom mitigation in patients with autism spectrum disorder. So I like to hear those kind of clinical trials going on with human beings instead of just animals. And it sounds like CBD-dominant extracts seem to be helping some people with autism spectrum disorders. Finally, let's wrap it up in South Korea. And this is an article out of the Marijuana Business Daily, written by Matt Lamers. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Oh, and it says a groundbreaking law legalizing medical cannabis in South Korea will take effect on March 12th. The South Korean legislature approved a law for medical marijuana in November. Under Ministry of Food and Drug Safety regulations, only certain cannabis products licensed and marketed in specific countries will be permitted. Some of those drugs that the South Koreans are going to let in are Sativex, Epidiolex, Marinol, and Sesamet. I haven't heard of the Sesamet. And the qualifying conditions to get those drugs are going to be epilepsy, symptoms of HIV and AIDS, cancer-related treatments, Dravet syndrome, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and multiple sclerosis. So I applaud the South Korean government for taking this step towards legalizing certain cannabis pharmaceuticals. What I'm hoping is that this will kind of open the government up more towards a whole plant-based CBD medicine or cannabis medicine. But all we can do is wait and see how it works out for them. And that is a report from the Cannabis Frontline. Next, I'm going to start the Predator of the Week. Like I said, with our beautiful friend, the ladybug. I figure I'd start with that one because it's a very well-known general predator. That's the first biological predator that I ever bought for my garden. And they're really a lot of fun to release in the garden, especially if you have really young kids, because they're just amazed by the whole thing. And once again, I wrote up an article about ladybugs. If you go over to inmygrow.com, you can type in the search ladybugs, and the article will come up. I'm basically going to read from that article. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is kind of long. I just want to give you some of the highlights of them. Alright, now the ladybug is also known as the ladybird or the ladybird beetle. And the ladybird's been used in England for over 500 years to describe the European beetle Coccinella septemba. Editing this and realizing, I can't say that second word after Coccinella, so do me a favor, go read the article and it'll spell it out for you right there. But it's really close to September, but it's something like Septempunctata. It's like Hakuna Matata, but different. Alright, but anyways, the ladybird's been used to describe that particular beetle. And there's a lot of different stories about how the ladybird or the ladybug got its name. But the one I found is probably one of the most popular ones. And it goes like this. During the Middle Ages in Europe, swarms of aphids were destroying crops. The farmers prayed to the Virgin Mary for help, and help came in the form of ladybugs that devoured the plant-devastating pests and saved the crops. Grateful farmers named the insects Our Lady's beetles, which became Our Lady's birds. Since Mary, Our Lady, was often depicted wearing a red cloak in early paintings, and the spots of the seven-spotted ladybug, which is most common in Europe, were said to symbolize her 7 joys and 7 sorrows. In other cultures, they've also been called God's little cow or Moses' cow. So there you go. That's one of the stories of how the ladybug or the ladybird got its name. That felt like a very Mr. Rogers kind of moment for me. So anyways, moving on. But eventually the ladybirds came to the USA where they were Americanized, and we started calling them ladybugs. But they're not actually bugs or birds, they're actually beetles. And now the name ladybug and ladybird are used to describe about over 4,000 different species of the Coccinellidae beetle. Whew. Yeah, I still don't think I got that one right. And most species of ladybugs are considered beneficial. There is a few of them that are pests, and they will eat plant material, but for the most part they are beneficial predators. And like I was saying, the ladybug is considered a general predator because they will feed on a lot of different kinds of pests, some scale. And the two main types that we're going to find here is the hypodamia convergence, and that's typically the one we're going to buy when we get them at the nursery. The other one is, again, the Coccinella septempunctata, the Hakuna Matata. They're also known as the C7 because they're going to have 7 spots on each wing, and they're the ones that were actually brought over from Europe. And since there are over 4,000 different species of ladybugs, they're going to come in a lot of different colors. You know, yellow, pink, orange, red. They're going to have some distinctive spots on them. And the bright colors are thought to be a warning to predators that they're going to taste really bad and that they're toxic if they're going to be eaten. Now here's the crazy thing I found out about the ladybugs, about the adult ladybugs. They can do something called reflex bleeding, which means that they will like bleed or ooze out this toxic yellow alkaloid blood from their leg joints. And supposedly this is a defense mechanism because it's going to taste bad and it's going to smell bad. Most predators aren't going to want to eat them. Now that doesn't mean that they don't get eaten. Some birds don't care and they'll just eat them. Toads will eat them. Certain wasps and dragonflies, spiders, they'll also eat the ladybugs. But for the most part, they're left alone by other predators. And the ladybugs are really good at hunting down, sapsuckers like aphids and thrips. A single bug can eat up to 5,000 aphids in its lifetime. But the adults aren't the real hunters. The real, hungry predators are going to be the larvae of the ladybug. They're the ones that are going to be most devastating to any kind of pest population. Part of that is because the adult ladybug, while it will feed on pests, it'll also feed on other things like pollen and nectar. So its appetite for the aphids isn't as big as the larvae is going to be. And that's really what we want when we release ladybugs into our gardens, is we want them to hang out long enough for them to lay eggs. Because when those eggs hatch, those larvae are going to be really hungry and really motivated to eat a lot of pests. And the larvae from the ladybug are going to be really small and black or dark colored with bright spots on them. They are not pests themselves, they are the larvae. Also, when the food and the prey get scarce for the ladybug and the larvae, cannibalism can start to happen. The larvae have been known to eat the ladybugs that are in their cocoons. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about releasing the ladybugs, because this can get a little tricky, especially if you're outdoors. Now the first thing I do when I get the ladybugs is that I'm going to put them in the refrigerator. That cooler temperature is going to put them in a sort of hibernation type of mood, so they won't be as active when I do release them, because the less active they are, the less likely that they're going to fly away right away. And I usually don't buy a big amount, I usually just buy a little canister. So I don't leave them in the refrigerator that long, 1-2 days at the most, because the longer they are in that canister, the more of them that are going to be dead for the most part. And when I'm releasing them outside in the garden, I'm going to wait until the sun goes down, until the temperatures have cooled down. Because again, those cooler temperatures are going to slow them down and they won't be as active and less likely to fly away. Now before I release them, I am going to water the garden, because I want to make sure that the ladybugs have water to drink. I don't know how long they've been in that packaging, and I don't know how thirsty they are. So water the garden before you release them, maybe about half an hour before I release them. Now I know if you've ever released ladybugs before, you're going to say, look, it seems like a waste of money because I open the package and they just fly away. Yes, they do, you're right. That's why I suggest keeping them in the fridge and then releasing them in the cooler evening hours, because that cooler temperature is going to make them less active and less likely to fly away. Now one thing that I did read about but I've never tried is this. I read that if you mix soda pop and some water, probably an equal amount, it doesn't really say how much, and you put it in a spray bottle and you spray the ladybugs with this soda water, and when it dries it glues the wings shut, and it says that it should be good for about a week. Like I said, I've never tried this. My big question is, okay, do I spray them with soda water like as soon as I open the container and then just spritz them down with soda water? probably what I'm going to wind up trying. That's the only way I can imagine doing that. But I'll let you know how that goes. Next time I get ladybugs, I'm going to try that. That sounds like some pretty good advice. All right, well, those are just a few of the things that I wanted to talk about as far as ladybugs go and using them as predators in the garden. As I said earlier, go to inmygrow.com, search for ladybugs, and the whole article will come up. That's going to have a lot more information about this. Now next, I'm going to play an interview that I did with Rodney Medina. And he was nice enough to take time out of his Saturday to sit down and talk to me about cannabis. And mostly about how cannabis is seen in the Spanish-speaking world. So I'm going to take a short break, play a little bit of music, and then I'm going to play that conversation for you.
To keep us together, to keep us together, alright, to keep us together, alright, keep us forever, oh yeah, take it down together.
Well, everyone, like I said, I invited my friend Rodney Medina to come on the show because we've been having this conversation for a couple of weeks about Latinos in the cannabis industry, not just here in America, but in the wider Spanish-speaking world, you know, Mexico, Central America, South America, Spain. Rodney, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad we could do this. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So what's your background exactly as far as in the media?
Well, my background is media. I've been in television production for over 25 years. And in the last 12 years, expanded my knowledge of, outside of television production, got into, because everything is going electronic, of course, and with computers, really opened the ability to learn things like web design and graphic design. So really, as an artist, that's what I consider myself to be. You really like to expand your craft in different areas. So my background has been media my whole life, and I really enjoy it. I feel that I'm very lucky to be able to have a job that allows me to be just creative.
So now, with that background, how did you wind up in cannabis? How did you wind up as an advocate for cannabis?
Well, as a creative person, I think I've been encouraged by cannabis, a lot of artists have for years. Not really a big, was never an everyday consumer of cannabis. But it was just the ability to come into a company. I was looking for some work when I was coming back into this area. I had lived out of the area for a while, and I'm always looking for freelance work. And this company that I work for now, Green Flower, was looking for an editor. So I came in and I was doing some part-time work for them. And, I became educated about cannabis through the work that I was doing for them. I was listening to some of the best, cultivators, doctors of cannabis, researchers, scientists, and just talking about the magic of this plant. And so that's how I came to become an advocate for it, because I realized how much there was to know about the plant and how much was not being told. Yeah, that's for sure. There's a lot of, if not very little information, there's also a lot of wrong information out there. Right. That's not until I started working in cannabis did I hear the word stigma so much. It really truly understanding that the stigma is just, it's more than a word. It's more than a word in cannabis, I think, than any other industry, because it's cannabis has been not just downplayed, but made to be an evil in the world. Yeah, it's an easy target to be vilified, to made, as the demon, as the bad guy. Now, speaking of stigmas, though, you're a well-traveled individual, man. You travel a lot down South America and Mexico. Yeah, cannabis really took me down there. You mentioned the Latino movement, and one of my first events that I went to was in Long Beach at the State of Cannabis, and I realized there weren't too many Latinos in the room, and the one Latina that I saw, I engaged with her and told her what I did. And she says, "Hey man, we need to get you what you do in Spanish." And this was my first event. And she just, like a light went on. Why is this information not being available? She said, "It's not."
So what year was this?
This was in 2016.
Oh, wow.
Or no, 17. Sorry. It was 2017. And, so she told me what she was doing in LA with cannabis. She told me what she was doing in Mexico with cannabis. And, she said, you need to go down to Mexico and see the scene down there. So I did. Just a few months later, I went down to their show, which was a health expo called Cannabis Salud. And, I really saw what the culture was with cannabis in another country, and it really opened my eyes to how big this world is and how big of a need there is for education about the plant.
So how is cannabis accepted down there in South America and Mexico? Is it the same kind of demonization as it is in America?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. America really did a number on the world with its demonization of cannabis. But what I've noticed in the few times that I've been down to Mexico and South America, they seem to have a more spiritual connection, of course, with the plant because it is part of their culture and has been. And just herbal care, holistic care is more part of their culture. So I think it's going to be an easier transition for them to accept cannabis as part of a daily health regimen. More so than and the shows that I go to are really focused on health. Not too many of them are focusing on adult use or what they call recreational use here. So everything is very specific. All the information that you gather at these shows are geared to health. And so you hear from doctors and scientists and researchers and nurses, people who are in the cannabis business. So they're really just trying to educate their populace on other professionals so they can in turn educate the populace.
Yeah, I've always found that a really interesting thing in the Mexican culture anyways, because I'm Mexican-American. Both of my parents are from Mexico. Is while the recreational use of cannabis down there is really looked down upon in a lot of older generations, they never did lose that connection as far as the healing properties of it. Because while a lot of the older generation really does look down upon just using it to party with and celebrate, they're really quick to apply an alcohol that has some cannabinoids in it, that they've had leaves, some kind of pot leaf in it for a while for an aching elbow or an aching muscle. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how they've held on to that even in the local farmacias and the local pharmacies. They'll have some kind of either a preparation that has cannabis in it or even to some extent some cannabis and peyote in it, which really interesting to me. Right.
And it's one of the things that I noticed that at some of these events that I would go to, here doctors don't really ingest God or any of that kind of spiritual discussion in their presentations. But I've actually heard a couple of doctors in Mexico finish their presentations with lines like, and don't forget, God gave us this plant. We cannot do a disservice to him by ignoring it. Things like that. And you don't get that in West or American doctors to invoke God into their presentations in any way.
Supernatural, yeah.
Exactly. So that to me is also an indicator of how they do accept the plant a little bit more, although there's still a huge stigma. But again, that's what I feel my job is to educate people to help remove that stigma.
So now in that education, we're talking about just reaching out to regular street-going people, not so much people in the industry, but as far as the education at a very basic level, not so much simplified, but distilled so people can understand it better.
I look at the audience are my friends, of all ages, because I have friends in all ages. So, I pretty much practice my pitch on them with regards to what do you need to know about cannabis? What do you know and what do you need to know to get you over that hump so that you can believe that this plant may help you? Because a lot of my friends and even family have health conditions where I know cannabis can help because I know I've learned so much about the plant, specifically about ailments like arthritis or Alzheimer's, just general pain that's a result of inflammation. So I always have that in the back of my head. So when I talk to people, I'm really trying to determine what kind of education is needed out there, because to me, if you educate a patient, if you educate a person about what this plant can do, you're going to create an advocate, and they're going to speak on the goodness of this plant as well. So that's what I feel my responsibility is: try to educate a person enough, based on where their level of education is now with the plant, increase it so they become an advocate, like I was.
So let's say you're trying to convince your older tia to take some cannabis for some arthritic joint. Mm-hmm. But she's totally against it because it has the word marijuana in it. How do you start that conversation with her? Where would you start that conversation?
Well, because if it was my tia, I would say, "Tia, your sister is taking it. This is how your sister has been able to get up in the morning now a little easier because she's putting this on her knees, or she's taking these drops on a daily basis." But see, that's where the education comes in. You have to really pull out, when you give somebody a little bottle with some drops in it, the education starts there, because they're not used to marijuana being administered that way, right? They think it's a joint, right?
Right, yeah.
So when it's now in a form that they're used to, the education process is a little easier, because now you can tell them, look, this is the science behind this. This is what these drops are. They're not the plant. There's no dirt here, so this is the education really starts with the delivery method.
Well, yeah, that is.
And the promise of what it can do for you, of course.
But that's a good point, though, because once you take away, like you said, the stigma of the only way they really remember it or recognize to take it is to smoke it, roll it up in a joint.
Sure.
And then now there's a whole other stigma associated or attached to that.
Right.
Just lighting up the joint. When you explain to them, no, look, you can get the same benefits. It's, it doesn't make you a drug addict, or it doesn't make you anything else, but it does help you.
Yeah, and I think that's, especially in the Latino culture, there's a lot of trust in word of mouth, or if they did it, we did it, so more so than any other culture, we have to be cognizant of that when we're educating, especially Latinos. They need to know and see. When they hear that somebody else is doing it, I think they're more willing to try it. I know that's how it is in our family. Right. My mom will talk about, they say that you can do this, so that will urge her a little bit to try something.
Yeah, my parents have come around to the same way. It's no longer this huge, just this huge label behind it. That you're going to be a marihuana loco if you keep smoking it, or
right.
something else is going to happen to you. It's going to lead to other things. The downfall of your whole life. It's just, it's a cool time to be in.
Yeah, it really is. I never thought I would be able to take a bud out of my pocket and go up to my mom and say, "Hey, Mom, smell this. Can you smell how sweet this is?" And I do that now. I wouldn't have thought of doing that.
Yeah, when you were a kid.
Yeah, a kid. Not even 5 years ago. Yeah. You go, "Mom, smell this." I go, "This is what they call, it has a fuely smell, or kind of like gas. Do you smell it?" She goes, "Oh yeah, you see, yeah, so wow. She can smell." Again, it's education. Did I ever think I'd be able to break open a bud like that and talk to my mom about it? Nah, but it's a beautiful thing. She's on CBD daily, and topicals as well as tinctures. And it helps her. It helps her tremendously. And so she's we adjust her doses as needed. And you have to be aware, which it's medicine, so you have to treat it as such.
So, like down in South America and Mexico, the other conventions that you go to in cannabis, where do they start trying to make contact with the patient, with the wider audience, with the wider people?
They have the health and science shows like I've been to, where it's more for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals, and then they'll have the recreational use shows as well. But from what I've seen in Mexico specifically, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations who work in the communities, who educate patients and about cannabis, how to make various medicines, which is topicals or butters or oils or whatever, and how to use it for their own particular health condition. So it's almost like a pop-up clinic, I guess you want to call it.
Okay.
I see a lot of those. I have friends who run some of those, and they're going to in city and into some remote areas and doing that type of education. So it's almost a circuit of these types of small clinics that they set up. And it's through these nonprofits that a lot of this the education and the cannabis products themselves are distributed from what I've seen so far.
Wow, that's cool, man.
Yeah, and it really is. Because a lot of those nonprofit organizers, they come to these shows because that's their business, right? And their patients come, so you really get to see the wide array of people who are using this plant of all ages. I mean, from 6 and 7 years old, because some of the kids have various health conditions which require them, whether it's seizures or another health condition, up to the people our age or my age who are using cannabis. Some are cancer patients, and we get to meet them. I don't see too much of that here in the shows here in the United States. It's more commercial. How can I get into the business?
Yeah,
but over there, you're really touching patients. You're hearing their stories.
Hey, so how is it accepted in Mexico as far as the use for kids? Because I know here it's a huge debate. It
is there too. It is there as well. I don't think it's any different. And it's equally there are organizations in Mexico where it was because of, like here, we have Charlotte's Web here with that story, and they have their own version, of that child or that nonprofit that was started that's because of the ailment of that child. So they have theirs as well. So I believe the stigma is much of the same. A good friend of mine who runs one of the clinics or runs of the shows in Mexico City, her son he had various health conditions as a child, and I think it was like seizures and tics and that kind of thing, and she speaks on behalf of moms who give their child cannabis all the time. And she does interviews, national interviews, because that's the kind of thing that's needed. People need to see that children can benefit from it, and hopefully remove that stigma of cannabis and children using it.
So would you rather see a model like the one they have in Mexico as far as the conventions being more medical oriented? Would you rather see that duplicated here in America? Or would you rather see both the recreational and the medical part kind of come together just because of a wider audience?
I think everything is needed. It's the recreational use and adult use type shows where they're mixing now, music and kind of the cultural fair type thing with cannabis.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking just because of those kind of events have such a wider draw or a bigger draw of people.
Yeah, they do. And in Mexico, and they're starting to do it here. They're aligning some of their shows like that. So you have the first part of the show is a health and science based show, and then they'll maybe go into entrepreneur training for people who are wanting to get into the cannabis business, and then they tie an adult use or recreational show to component as well. That way, you're getting everybody. You're getting the people who are there for the health reasons, all the way to people who are just there who use it recreationally
to just have fun with it.
Sure. Because that's the audience. The audience is everybody, and we have to educate everybody. You never know where your best advocate's going to come, where they're going to come from.
So now, speaking on that, where's the Latino community as far as the entrepreneurship, and how do we get into this wider business? Well,
that's the challenge. It always is. There's a term that's used a lot now called social equity with the cannabis business. Where they're well aware of the damage that was caused by the war on drugs to the Latino community. And in an attempt to make those reparations, they've incorporated a social equity program into the cities that legalize it, which is supposed to allow minorities to enter the business and have a share of what's of the profits that are being made. Unfortunately, from what I'm seeing in the cannabis industry, those opportunities really aren't flourishing yet. Hopefully they will. But I feel that's part of my responsibility as well, to help Latinos learn more about business, so that they can have an opportunity, whether that's how to access financing, how to use social media in their business, how to open a business, how to put a business plan together. You would think that, Latino entrepreneurs would know all that stuff, and a lot of them do, but we really need to help them. We need to help them put together their own business plan in their own head, I think, better. So that's I think part of my responsibility as well. Work with other professionals, train Latinos from, at any age, specifically about the cannabis business, hoping that they can have some of those profits as well.
Yeah. Another thing, as you were talking about social justice in the community, is the idea of expungement of past nonviolent cannabis offenses. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if it's a nonviolent cannabis offense, they can petition to see if they can get it resentenced and maybe even expunged.
Yeah, that's really important. It's you have the things going on with prison reform, and it's really coming. I think cannabis is putting a lot of that, under the magnifying glass now, especially. But you mentioned prison reform and prisoners and expungement. Hemp is something else that's offering a lot of potential for jobs and just an industry as a whole. And I was just talking to somebody this week about the hemp business.
Yeah, hemp is going to be really huge the way I see it and what I'm reading about it and how I understand the Farm Bill and just the legalities of cross-border sales of it. Now that it's in the Farm Bill, now that it's no longer coupled to any kind of drug scheduling. So yeah, there's a huge potential there.
Yeah, and I brought that up only because just this week, and this is how fascinating this plant is. Just this week, I was talking to a local. He's a jobs person. He's a union leader, and we were talking about workforce development for Latinos and training them on how to work with hempcrete. And we're actually putting a workshop together in Los Angeles next week, which will demonstrate how to use hempcrete at one of the local community colleges. Well, again, another program that's being born out of the cannabis industry or hemp industry.
Well, what's hempcrete, though?
Hempcrete is they're using hemp curd and breaking it down into a material which they can then form into a hemp concrete. And hemp concrete makes perfect insulation. It is mold proof. Apparently it's fireproof. There's a lot of and of course hemp it takes months to grow.
Yeah, it takes months to grow.
As opposed to waiting 30 years for a tree. So we're going to build a small structure on the campus, just small, probably about the size of a doghouse, just to demonstrate the properties of hempcrete. Again, that's a story in itself of what's going on at the community colleges in LA.
Wow, that's
for the first time.
And so, are they hoping to get financing to go private?
They want to put together a program at the college so that they can develop a workforce of educated hempcrete builders. LA Trade Tech architects are designing the little structures that they're building. They're building the molds. They process the cannabis on another campus. They bring it back to LA Trade Tech, and I think this will be their fourth workshop where they do these demonstrations. So what we're trying to do is get people there, dignitaries, union leaders. I'm having a fire captain and the one of his engineers go and check it out so they can see what the properties are, because it starts with, they need to see it, then eventually they'll test it, and then hopefully they'll incorporate it into everyday
and
construction.
get behind it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's again, there's all being born out of cannabis.
Yeah, hemp's pretty amazing, and everything that's going on right now with it, it's exciting. It's just in its infancy.
Sure.
Yeah, we have no idea where it's going to wind up in 5 years, what that is going to look like, and that's apart from what cannabis is going to look like.
Right.
From the
Yeah, I've been to MJ BizCon in Las Vegas and went to a couple of the hemp presentations, and first thing one of the presenters said, he goes, first of all, hemp is going to be way bigger than cannabis, because of its reach, textiles, and its promises.
So I hear you're going to Cannabis.
Yeah, I meet a lot of interesting people when I travel to these shows. And cannabis people are the best people. We always meet really great people when it comes to cannabis. And I was in Bogota. No, I'm sorry, in Medellin, and I met a photographer, and he asked me if I was going to go to Cannabis, and I had heard about it, and I didn't have plans. He says, "Dude, you have to go, man. It's the biggest show,
Yeah, from what I've heard.
Yeah. And again, I've only been in the cannabis industry for 2 years, going on 3 years, so I'm still learning about all the things that are going on. But so I looked into it, and it looked great. It looks like it's more adult use and recreational, but those are the people we need to reach. So anytime I go to these shows, I feel like it's me reaching out to my audience, the people who I have to help either educate or help them, give them the tools to educate others. So that's why I like to go to these shows, because I truly feel like I'm meeting the people who are making history now.
So do you have anything planned for Cannabis? Are you going to be interviewing people?
I will be interviewing people that I come into contact with. I don't do much media at these shows with regards to recording, just because it's my time to just learn in the industry. Uh-huh. So I do enough learning at the office and editing and shooting the things I do. So when I go out, it's really me being the scout, really the scout for my own mind of how I need to construct the message so I can teach more people about the benefits of this plant. All right. Well, that's too bad. Yeah. I was hoping you get on the mic out there, but that's all right. Yeah, maybe so. When it's funny because I always take my cameras. I usually take a video camera and a still camera, because by hobby that's what I do. And I feel really comfortable behind the camera. So I usually come back with a lot of pictures, right? But it's usually for my own personal use and for my own memories. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Rodney, do you have anything else you want to talk about, man? I would just say that it's really important that people learn as much as they can about this plant. Especially whether you're using it or you're considering using it, or a family member who may benefit from its use, that you educate yourself so that you don't have, or they don't have, a bad experience. You hear that way too many times. I had an edible and then I was frozen for 4 hours or 2 days. And that is, it's an injustice to the plant. Now you've had that bad experience, and someone for the rest of their life, for the rest of their life. So you have to be responsible. You have to be responsible in how you communicate about this plant. So that's why education is so important. It answered a lot of questions that I had when I started learning, because there had been times that I had smoked and I've gotten too high, and I didn't freak out, but now I know why. The plant, but that's the magic of the plant, man. It has a different effect for everybody. Oh, yeah. And different varieties will affect people differently, man. Yeah. I didn't realize that I had a sleeping problem until I started taking 1-to-1 tinctures. And I was given that free just because I was shooting a product, a person developed that product. She gave it to me, and I took that 1-to-1 tincture at night. And I slept through the night. I was in the same position that I went to sleep in when I woke up. So before you wouldn't sleep? I had no idea, man. I was waking up 3, 4, 5 times a night. I thought that was normal. You wake up, you roll over, go back to sleep, wake up, roll over, go back to sleep, maybe check your messages on your phone,
Yeah.
And man, I started taking those 1-to-1 tinctures and I was sleeping less hours, but getting up more rested.
More restful sleep, huh?
Incredible, man. That's when I really started that was early when I started working in this cannabis education. And so that's really what turned the light on for me, was being able to turn the light off at night. So it was, me learning about myself through that one experience was really helpful. And, I hope everybody can get from the plant even just a good night's sleep. I mean, who doesn't want a good night's sleep? And if it's just going to cost you $40 or $50 a month to get that good night's sleep, wouldn't you pay for it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because it's, we need sleep. Yeah. But so that's what I'm saying, is that for everybody it's different, but educate yourself about it. And I think you'll find that there's something for you in it one way or another. Or maybe even your pet, right? Because even they have pet products now. Pet products, and some people love their pets more than they love themselves. So
that's for sure.
So if look into it, man, look into cannabis and educate yourself. And there's a lot of resources online, and I think it's going to be fun to be part of this history.
Yeah. So do me a favor and tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, just so they can keep up with.
Yeah, one of I feel is one of the best resources for online education is the web platform that I create content for, which is Green Flower Media, and you can go to www.green-flower.com, and that's a good resource. Excellent resources, a lot of free material that you can watch, and then of course just do your due diligence out on the web. There's tons and tons of resources now with cannabis. I prefer videos. There's some very good videos to learn from. And on my personal social media, follow me, because I do a lot of cannabis stuff even on my own personal social media. You can see the people that I'm interviewing, kind of follow the places that I'm traveling. And on Instagram, I'm Rodney Media. It's like Rodney Medina, but without the N, Rodney Media.
That's funny.
And that was an accident, actually, but it turned out pretty good, And then, of course, on Facebook, just Rodney Medina. You can follow me there as well.
Right on. Well, Rodney, thank you for your time, brother. Everybody else, hang tight. I'm going to play some music, and we'll be back. So I just want to talk about something a little bit more that me and Rodney spoke about for a little bit. And that's the fact that if you live in a state that allows some kind of cannabis use, whether it's medical or recreational, and you have a non-violent cannabis offense on your record, I would suggest that you get in touch with your local district attorney, because you could be able to get that resentenced or even expunged from your record, especially if that offense is keeping you from getting into the legal cannabis game. So just think about that. Once again, I want to thank Rodney Medina for taking the time to talk to me. That was a lot of fun. I loved hanging out with that guy. Well, brothers and sisters, we've reached the end of the show. Don't forget, if you have a question or a comment about this episode, you can get a hold of me really easy on Instagram at InMyGrow, or you can send me an email. That is inmygrow@gmail.com. And as always, if this show has entertained you, educated you, or even given you a little bit of escape from your day, and you're able to help the show financially, go over to patreon.com/inmygrowshow and leave a donation. Every amount is hugely appreciated, okay? Because I use that money to pay for hosting fees, to pay for equipment, and lots of other things that keep this show going. If you don't want to leave a donation, go over to inmygrow.com and you can click on the Support the Show tab and you can buy a t-shirt. Or, even easier, you can click on the Amazon link in the show notes before you go shopping at Amazon. And that just lets them know that we sent you and we get a commission. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. I get it. Here's how you can help. Subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to the website, and then tell 3 other people about it. Really easy, really simple. Also, if you are a cannabis company that wants to advertise to our worldwide audience, again, send me an email, inmygrow@gmail.com. Well, as I said, that's it. That's all I've got. I'm going to get out of here. Now, I love you all very much, and remember to always grow, learn, and teach.
Do you really wanna heal your patients? Nature ready made the medication. Babylon busy build abominations. Too long it's on the list, it's endless applications. West Coast free the weed. West Coast free the weed. West Coast free the weed. You get to follow when, better get to following. Gotta get to following. You get to follow them. Get to following. It is no mystery, we're making history. It is no mystery, we're winning in victory. It is no mystery,